All right, we're here with Justin Gray. First of all, congratulations on your Grammy win.
Thank you very
huge.
much. I appreciate it.
Let's ask some questions. All right, when you start an immersive project, are you thinking musically first or spatially first?
With this project, which is Immersed, which is an album of mine, I started musically. But space is a part of the music.
Right.
So they're not actually separated in the sense that when we think of any music, melody, groove, harmony, form, these are aspects of the music, but space to me is just a part of that.
Right.
So when I'm writing the part, I'm imagining how it feels, what it's blending with something else, but also where it is.
Right.
And I think that that's the part of that makes this particular project kind of unique, is writing it at the source where space is the music.
So let's say for mixing engineers that are not mixing sort of spatially, do you recommend them leaving a room somehow? Do you make it quieter? Do you suggest to make it quieter before they take it to spatial audio?
What a great question. So the idea of a production that's done in stereo first, which is of course 99.999% of music, and for good reason, right? If that's what we're comfortable with artistically, if that's how we're going to make the best music, that's what we should do.
Right.
So when we come to that next stage, which is the spatial part, I call that job spatial remixing, because I'm doing a remix. Imagine you mix your song, so you get to the end of your production, you're sending it off to mastering. You have a couple decisions to make. One is, do you create accurate tracks or stems that are post-processing? Stems, of course, being groups of tracks, or ideally even getting more parts is better for me, more tracks, where you put all the processing on it. You keep your reverbs, you keep your compression, all of those kinds of things. What that leaves me with is the ability to now spatialize the parts and stay also very artistically and sonically true to the original, which usually makes a lot of sense to an artist. There is also the opportunity to give more multi-tracks, where you say, hey, here's all the post-edited parts. Maybe there's like dry and wet track delivery, where it's like, here's what I did, but if there's something in space in the immersive version that could be done better or potentially differently because of space being a factor, I really love that ability to dance between the two. But I will say, at the end of the day, I think of the spatial remix job like mastering, in that I don't think it should define the way a mixer wants to work or a producer wants to work. Rather, I'm going to work with what I get. But the more I get, the better it can be. Because I can be more precise about location, I can be more subtle, I can potentially manipulate things differently, leave the drums alone, but maybe the background vocals can be panned somewhere or manipulated to make the Atmos mix that much better.
So is that creative decision to put those things into space, is that decided by you when it brings to you? You do your mix, and do they ever come back and be like, hey, whatever, that piece of element should be more in the front, and then that's how you sort of communicate things through it?
Absolutely. I think one of the things that has made me good at the job is I think that my relationship with music and space, it feels pretty natural to me where to put things. Also, as a producer, as a composer, as a player, I think the music tells us what feels best for the music. It's hard to say that something's right or wrong, but my tendencies generally have been appreciated by the people that I'm working with. But I get in my zone, I sit down, I start to do the mix, I do the spatial aspect of it. I'm also, of course, having to adjust the timbre, adjust the compression according to space. I'm having to listen to the master, like the tracks and the stems aren't mastered, so I'm also having to chase that sound of the final production. They might come in and say, love this, but actually, you know what, there's that background part that you have on the sides. To me, it's got to be with the lead vocal. And really, at the end of the day, it's only the artist who knows that. At a core level. No one knows the song better than the artist and the producer. So just like mixing in stereo, I'm there to just be part of the team and do what serves the music best.
What's something immersive audio lets you express emotionally more than the stereo? What do you think? So how does it immersive sort of audio help you express music?
I think for me, one of the amazing aspects of an immersive playback is the ability to not have to fight with masking. So we're here, we've got 7.1.4 around us. Well, when I can record a part or mix a part to be in our side speaker, it's no longer layered on top of the thing in the right speaker. And so a lot of times when we're mixing in stereo, we need to work very hard to carve space for things. In immersive, I've been able to leave full range instruments and have full range guitar behind me and in front. When I go to do the stereo mix of it, let's say my album, the Immersed album, stereo mix is a totally separate mix. I had to carve that thing right up.
Wow.
Make space, lower things. You've got to do all the things to make it fit. Where here, we have this ability to let things kind of breathe. And so I think it actually allows for a level of detail and complexity in sound that is hard to allow every sound to have that in stereo.
So do you ever have any tips for somebody who doesn't have all these speakers around them, just has a pair of monitors? Is there any way to make something more immersive, I guess, within the mix? Do you have any tips for that?
Now, are you talking about making it feel enveloping in a stereo mix or preparing for an immersive mix?
No, I would say in stereo, just dealing with stereo in this case.
I think ultimately our sense of immersion and space, it always comes down to the arrangement, right? Any good mix, everything is about the arrangement. So if we want something to feel large and enveloping, it comes down to the parts. So for instance, if we've got vocals, but you've got double vocals on the side, you get that extra wide kind of feeling. Those are the kinds of things that I think really lead to an immersive space. The other is just recording it at the source. There is nothing better than just capturing the true ambience of something in a lovely room. And hey, if we're recording and we can't be in a lovely room, so be it. We use our plugins and we use post-production tools. We can make it sound great. But if you can record your drums, for instance, in a beautiful room, and you get the right sense of where those room mics should be, or even distance mics, now that's that feeling of immersion, because it puts us as a listener in a real space and our brain does the rest for us.
Awesome. What's one technical detail most producers completely overlook in immersive mixes?
A technical detail. I think that we need to focus on the word decorrelation. Decorrelation is the idea that a sound source in one place and a sound source in another place are different. And the reason being, in nature, imagine we have a guitar track. If I take that guitar track and I pan it to the front and then I pan it to the back, when I'm sitting in the room, the speakers will trick me into thinking I'm experiencing guitar from two places. But in all reality, it's a tightrope, because in nature, we can't hear the same source in front of us and behind us. By the time it gets behind us, it's changed. Timing has changed, timbre has changed. And so what we have a responsibility to do in immersive is ensure that the sources, let's say we have a guitar track and we want to feel it behind us, we need to decorrelate it. That can be as simple as a Haas effect, delays, reverbs. If you do have to double it using something like a chorus or something to just give it difference. Even better, if you want guitar there and you want guitar behind you, track another guitar. Pop vocals, right? If you want that chorus to grow, you start layering things. I think that in many ways, rather than requiring on panning to make space, look at the ways to use timing-based effects, like spatial effects, to create that sense of space and ensure that sources in different places are not the same thing panned to two places, that we decorrelate it at the source.
Is there a plugin that you've recently found that's specifically useful for immersive audio?
Oh,
there are many, because I've never really looked into it.
So maybe what you have to do is you tell me the category, and then we'll go down that road.
Let's start with EQ.
Nice thing about EQ is that even a multi-mono plugin in Pro Tools is going to work across, let's say, an immersive bed track, because it'll affect each channel separately. That said, now we're talking favorite EQ. Most used EQ would be FabFilter for me.
Of course, yeah.
Pro Q3, Pro Q4 may work in an immersive capacity. Also in Pro Tools, if you've got lots of different objects, you can always group them along the same, insert A and go into the groups, take off globals and select how the plugins are going to behave across multiple tracks. And now you've just turned that plugin into a multi-channel kind of tool.
Right.
So EQ, now we can do that with all sorts of EQs, but I would say when I'm working in immersive, from a spatial standpoint, if I want to get some vibe, I'm still going to be using my Pultex or those kinds of EQs on the source material, mono, stereo source material. And then on the room or ambient content, I usually want something pretty clean. I want to maintain the detail, so FabFilter's doing the job for me.
Do you use any widening plugins on your mix bus or something like that to sort of add that polish?
Right, so in immersive, we don't have a mix bus in the same concept. Now, here's why. We could have, if we were mixing for a very specific set of speakers, let's imagine 5.1. So LCR, then our left rear and our right rear. They're actually technically called sides in 5.1, and then a subwoofer, so 5.1. If I know that I'm mixing 6 channels of audio, now I can treat it like a bus. Even if it's 2 channels, 6 channels, doesn't matter. I can put an effect, compression, I can do it all. In immersive, when we talk about Atmos, we start talking about object-based technology. And what an object is it's a sound source that has a spatial location that is not specifically a speaker. It's a virtual space that the technology sees, and then what you do as a user is say, I've got 5 speakers. It decodes to that. I have 12 speakers. It decodes to that. So what happens, though, is that when we're mixing into all of these objects, there isn't one single bus. Think about your stereo bus. It's a 2-channel bus.
Right.
There's 2 pieces of audio. That's where the side channel information is coming from. That's how it's all processed. But another thing is, so your question originally was stereo widening. That comes back to that decorrelation thing. If I want this to feel bigger, I need to create new space. And so rather than making the track feel wider in stereo, I don't have to do that anymore. I can literally pan it beside you. I can pan it behind you. Wow. The key there is, let's say I do it with reverbs. So when we talk about plugins, there's tons of immersive reverbs and immersive delays. The ones by Cinematic Rooms are off the hook for reverbs, beautiful. There's Seventh Heaven that's like a Bricasti. There's, Liquid Sonics is the company. Then we come to Sound Particles has some really cool tools. FabFilter has an immersive reverb that's quite functional.
The R2 or whatever that they...
Pro R2, exactly. And so what it is there's an algorithm that's multi-channel. And so you can have timing information. Snare drum emits from the front but is moving to the back. So all those things we have to do in stereo to mimic that, we can physically create it in this. So when you ask even things that we can't do, we can literally widen something. Rather than making the speakers seem like they're there, I can just put the sound beside you.
That's amazing.
It's quite something.
What was the moment where you found out that you want to get into Atmos and around sound? Where is there like a song you were listening to? You imagine it was a spatially 3D.
For me, I've always loved film, so I've been listening to going to the movie theaters. Film's been in 5.1 as long as I have been going to the cinema. So eventually I actually set up 5.1 in my studio. This is quite a long time ago, and it wasn't even for work. I didn't have work. I was just like, I know I want to work somehow in surround. I'm into it. So I have a wicked disc collection of older formats like SACD, DVD-A, and I bought the Lord of the Rings box set of just the cues. So it's only the music for all 3 records. On DVD-A, all the 5.1 mixes, which are mixed at Abbey Road, recorded at Air Lyndhurst. The soundtrack is off the hook. I listened to it in the studio in 5.1, and I could never go back. It's that detail. But it's also that feeling of suddenly, rather than I'm watching the ensemble, it's literally there with them.
That's crazy.
I'm like Howard Shore, I'm the conductor.
Yeah.
I think that feeling has never left me, and I've just wanted to create that ever since.
Amazing. How do you see that, about live performance? Do you put an audience in the middle of the stage and surround the bed around them, and that's how you do it?
My answer could be yes, but live performance, I'm tricky. So
tricky,
the Immersed album is that exact concept, is that the audience is in the middle, and the ensemble, there's 38 musicians, are literally around them playing towards them.
Wow.
The cool thing about production, though, is the way I recorded the record is still overdub styles, because I want the drums to be super tight like a R&B record, and the strings to sound like a Lord of the Rings score.
Yeah.
I want the kalimbas at the top of the record to be like there's 15 of them all around you at the same time as having a brass ensemble. And as you know, we put those all in one room, it's going to be a mess. I'm going to have to sacrifice the closeness of the drums, then I'm going to sacrifice the detail of the string because of all the bleed. And I'm not opposed to bleed, but when we're talking about some instruments are so quiet, some instruments are so loud, it creates a problem. So I was able to create surrealism in the sense that the speakers here are kind of musicians, but it's also giving the audience a perspective that kind of exists live. Now, that said, if we were to do it live, we could put the band around, but it's kind of awkward, right? Because now the musicians have to be super far apart from each other.
Yeah.
They don't get to vibe the same way. And how many can you really fit?
Right.
Think of Woodstock. You just keep putting line arrays of speakers and you can get up to 500,000 people.
Yeah.
This concept, how far can you separate the musicians before it's a problem?
Yeah.
2 feet, maybe?
Yeah.
Think of, you have an audience of 15 people.
And how are they going to stay synchronized? How do they know exactly when, right?
Yeah, we could do it with monitors, we could do it with headphones, but now we're fundamentally separating musicians who ideally, I want to be up on the drums, as a bass player.
Right.
I'm used to the hi-hat being right there. Eye contact like this, it's part of making music. So to a certain degree, the technology kind of this possible in a way that a live concert might not. Now, there are some times in history, though, where it's been a thing, and I think that there are ways to do it. For instance, there's of compositions in the Renaissance where the choir is supposed to be in the rafters of the church. And like concept has been around, but that's a very specific instance of a lot of musicians, and the majority are on stage, and then maybe some are in the hall. But I think to a certain degree, this might be an area where playback is kind of thing.
Yeah, necessary. Now let's talk about the Grammy.
Okay.
What did winning a Grammy validate for you?
I think with this particular one, Recording Academy is filled with our peers, right? It's producers, it's engineers, it's artists, it's composers, it's people in the music industry, and it's built up of the voting members are our colleagues and people who know what this is. And so I think especially with a project like this, which is one that really reflects who I am as a composer and as a musician, I'm playing bass on it, as a producer, as an engineer, it's just a thumbs up to say like, hey, this crazy way in which you've approached this thing is good, like do it.
Recognized, yeah.
And I think it's, so on a very personal level, we make records. So I'm the artist in this case, like I'm the engineer and the producer, but I'm also the artist. We wear our hearts on our sleeves. We're bearing our creativity to the world, and to have folks respond to that positively, not even before the award, like audiences be like, man, I'm really into this music, to be moved by it, and then of course to be recognized at that level is affirming on many levels.
Yeah, all right. And what do you think winning a Grammy tells you about immersive audio for the future? Like, is it going?
Yeah, I think that this, all traditions, including immersive audio as a lineage, right? Nothing pops out in somewhere instantaneously. It's all based on studying the past and moving forward through collective knowledge. And so when I think of the folks who have won a Grammy in this category before, they're my heroes, like my heroes. Yeah. I think the first person who won in the surround category is Al Schmidt. I think of Leslie Ann Jones. I think of Morten Lindberg, the co-producer of the record, who's won in this category before and won again with this. Michael Romanowski, the mastering engineer, who's worked with some of my favorite records, like Ann Mincelli and George Massenburg and Eric Schilling. And so all of these folks who have kind of to this stage have really set the stage and the quality and the bar. I think in this instance, this record represents getting to the composition and getting to the source creatively. And rather than immersive only being a remix format, which it's so good at, it's an opportunity to say, let's get artists thinking about this at the in their mind, and then find ways of capturing that imagination and present it to the world. So that's kind of what the thesis statement of the record is to a certain degree, and to have that recognized means that the community is like, yes. And it's not the only way. You think that, again, there's going to be records that were made in stereo first that will be celebrated because they just came together so beautifully. I think it gives a really positive nudge to the creatives to get involved and see how space becomes a part of their own music.
Yeah, interesting. What about clients, right? Because usually, like, you have a stereo track, it's mastered, you're happy with it. Like, how do they decide to approach you? You know what, this would be great in Atmos. Like, do you find clients like that? How do you seek them out?
Yeah, I was one of the first to be doing it in the world for music. Definitely in Canada and North America, first, but among the first. And so very early on, there were a lot of folks, including major record labels, the majority of the majors, as well as independent artists, et cetera, who heard about the technology. And very early on, this is 9 years ago, are like, well, who can do it? Okay, Justin's in Toronto. Like, there was as many folks. And so I did have the pleasure and the privilege to be able to work with people early on and develop a catalog and develop kind of with it and a resume. So I've been very fortunate to have a lot of people kind of...
Right.
But that being said, the Toronto community, for instance, especially is just a celebration of our music community. We have so much talent. We have so many people. And so I also naturally, my colleagues, people in the community, they hear about what I do. We get together, we have a conversation like this, and every once in a while you're describing it to someone and just the light bulb goes off.
Yeah.
And, for all people, it's not like a two-thing, hand business card, suddenly job appears. It's all organic, right? It's all meeting people, and I think just doing your best work always our best foot forward. Saying to things in lots of environments, big projects, some are small projects, but just giving it your all. And you never know where that's kind of to whose ears are going to hear it and be like, oh, I want to do this.
Yeah. No, all right. Just make sure you're on the frame. Stay there for a sec. Oh yeah, you're perfect. Okay. All right. So did you feel like winning a Grammy, did you feel like it was the peak moment or a sign for something greater?
Whew, what a question. There's no question in that moment that it is a peak. I mean, what an honor. I mean, I've Grammy since I was a kid with my dad.
Right.
Obviously, in this category, this is the first time a Canadian's been nominated, let alone won. It's in my world, it's a rarity. I'd never even been to the Grammys before. So it is the pinnacle. And I think I've even tell this to my students sometimes, you know, we're always looking forward. In our lives, music is a never-ending journey. And it is helpful to just stop and say, you know, I'd be proud of something. And to what that means for you individually, to reinforce what it means for your community. Because I see the was a reflection of recognizing the music that we created together, the engineers, the filmmakers, everybody who's involved. And so I've tried to take a moment to just be like, no, you know, something to just celebrate collectively and be proud of. It does give the confidence to be like, okay, those ideas that have been brewing, let's go for it. Not for a Grammy, not for an award, but rather, again, that the community is saying, hey, we really appreciated this. So I've got some other ideas that, yeah, it fire a little bit and just says, like, when the time comes, go for it.
Yeah. So your immersive album, did you even have an idea that you might, like, did Grammy sort of consideration of it coming later when it was kind of, or was your goal starting the album was like, you know what, I'm going to shoot for a Grammy with this one? No,
it's not at the very start. I mean, you're starting to think about music, the thing you could be doing is right, because at the end of the day, an award, or even how people experience the music, right? Like, externalizing it early on and thinking about what other people think about it is a very, very thing for an artist. There might be some who can do it, but for me, it's like you make art kind of first, and it needs to be very, very, because it needs to be an exploration of something that you believe in. And you kind of believe in it no matter whether you like it or not. I'm going to do this. Once the record is, I'd started externalizing it. I am a Recording Academy member. I'm aware of the way the Grammys work and the Junos work, and, you know, it's part of my world. So when the record's done, you know, I put it in as a Recording Academy member. I project forward, and then, you know, at that point, this is up to the voting members. This is up to the folks who have been, you know, in that decision-making process. The world that we live in, I mean, there's talented people. There's so much great music being made, including the other nominees who are involved. I know them all, and they're amazing. So, you know, I'm not aware. It's not that it just happens out of nowhere. Like, there's a process to being nominated. There's a process to then campaigning for a win. There's a lot of work, even online, making people know about the project, right? Especially here in Toronto. It's like we don't always get to get our music to cross the border properly. Multiple borders, not just the States. But this record, I toured the film. I went to New York, LA, San Francisco, Germany, London, Denmark, here in Toronto. So, you know, once in my consciousness, then just like with I gave it my all. I did everything that I was capable of doing to give the music its best chance. But yeah, it has to be a thing that's considered at the point of completion. Because, yeah, you know, opinions infused into our artistic decisions is a dangerous thing to do.
For sure. Yeah. Music should be a sort of essentially this, and then whatever comes after it, I think it's just a celebration, right?
Yeah, and look, not to say that when we're making music, especially when it's our career, like I'm speaking in deals. Of course, at a certain point, you think about, is an audience going to like it? Of course, you can't, you know, trying to something and potentially hoping that someone will appreciate it. But the key is knowing, you know, how those things to come in, but not change what you believe in.
Right.
The thing you started to make it for. Because if it starts to change according to this, I think it's such an abstract thing. I could be like, oh, I'm going to change this bass line because I think you're going to like it. And then I'm like, oh, it's okay. Like, oh, I wonder if, you know, at the end of the day, it's like the record represents is a belief.
Yeah, okay, awesome. That winning a Grammy is like a shift music is headed. Is that a sign for a shift where music is headed? Do you think that 99.9 stereo will sort of get lower at 0.1% immersive gets larger?
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't think that that's only because of this particular
course.
award. I think that my community would think that I'm at the forefront of the thing, but I'm not alone. Like I said, there's a lineage to everything. I've got colleagues who have been exploring these concepts for a long time, just as I have. And so what I think it does is it shines a spotlight.
Yeah.
And it gives an opportunity for someone to say, who maybe otherwise wouldn't have been aware, to say, oh, what's that? And then the more, awareness is acknowledges. So the more that somebody's aware of it, even in our conversation, maybe someone who's watching this is like, oh man, okay, that sounds like really makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Or maybe before it felt foreign, and it kind of disarms the fact that it's like, no, this is a.
Yeah.
I also what happens is, think about mono to stereo. In the beginning, everything's for mono, of course. When stereo comes in, it's only an engineering format. The artists aren't even in the room, even for some of our favorite records ever. And they pen some stuff here, they put it out into the world. Eventually, artist comes into the room, starts to hear it, says, now that left and right is a possibility, my arrangement's going to change. It takes time. It took mono to stereo decades. To a degree, immersive is moving much faster than that because of our kind of exponential growth of time. We're seeing a faster. I think a lot of people wish it was like it had already happened, but look, aesthetics, preferences, they take time.
Yeah.
But the more people have positive experiences with it, the more that one artist does it, another artist will just naturally ripple out like.
Is there AI been sort of good at remixing sort of an immersive, or is there anything for AI yet?
I don't think it is yet, but I'm sure it's. I think I've heard whispers of some stuff. Ultimately, AI, all of our entire industry. It has implications at the creative stage. It has implications at the post-production stage. My thing with AI is the ethics are the biggest challenge. Sure. Ultimately, technology is technology develop, and in many ways, technology has had many positive benefits for us, even at the time that we weren't aware of. So I'm not opposed to the idea that there's positive outcomes that can come from it, but anything that is theft, anything that is blatantly taking intellectual property against copyright law, well, it's just illegal.
Yeah.
If they're bulldozing over the fact because of having power or the other folks not having the ability to fight back, that doesn't make it ethical.
Yeah.
And therefore, I'm not a fan of that at this moment. And I do see there being lots of loopholes in that area. I am not a lawyer. I am not capable of necessarily offering the answer. But I do think that the ethics are important. As for a tool, for instance, that can do a remix, whether it's in stereo or in Atmos, a question I'd have right away is like, well, how does it,
right.
Where did you get that information?
Where's that creative decision comes in? Yeah.
And so if it has studied my work, well, I never said yes.
Correct, yeah.
If it hasn't, I, as a learner, want to know, well, how did this happen?
Yeah.
If I hear something's come out in any format, stereo, a song, whatever it is, my first question is going to come from a place of not having a full trust in the ethics, because the AI community has not demonstrated that they are inherently interested in ethics.
Yeah.
In fact, that they've to not doing it.
Right.
So my first question would just be, let's say it sounds amazing. Like, cool, how?
Right.
How is this? If it's happening organically, I need to know.
Right.
We all need to know.
Yeah.
And B, if it's happening organically, how did that happen? And how is it ethical? Because there's no question that the problem we have with AI is the potential of it taking and gutting the financial aspects of our entire industry.
Absolutely.
And it's not just our industry. So if that's going to happen, it can't happen based on theft. If it can happen in ways that are organic, if it can happen in other ways that are beyond my understanding, I'm all ears. Like, as an educator, I'm all ears to sit down and be told how something can work, to learn about the potentials, and if the technology is evolving in a way that I don't yet understand, I want to know. I look forward. When I go to those AI panels, I want to hear the answer. I have yet to hear a very clear answer of how the majority of the training has been done without breaching ethical boundaries.
Yeah. All right. Well, to permeate a little bit, obviously you might be, because you do teach here in college. Do you think to be a good music producer or, successful, what you'd guess, do you need to go to school?
No, but the clear advantages to any mentorship is if the mentor regardless of whether it's an institution or done privately, online or in person, if that mentor understands how to best serve that learning experience, that's the key. And it's so specific and it's so personalized. And it requires not only someone who's good at their job, but has learned how to explain that to somebody else. And that is a specific skill. And being doesn't mean you need to be a good teacher. Being a great teacher doesn't necessarily make you a great producer either. I do think, like a place like we are now at Humber, I'm surrounded by really inspiring colleagues who have dedicated a lot of their lives to not only figuring out their craft, but how to explain that craft to a lot of people, and how to organize learning experience. You know, you come in, use all these speakers right away. Well, that's not necessarily the right first step. The answer to that is very, very specific according to that person is at. So learning to meet someone where they are, and also one of the things mentorship can do for us, it certainly has done for me, is it teaches what you don't. When we're working on our own, like I've done lots of my own where I've explored it on my own. And it can go really well. In fact, it can lead to some really exciting things that maybe weren't constrained because you were told how to do it by somebody else. But, you know what you work with parameters, and then suddenly a mentor comes along and is like, oh, what about this, 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 and this? Veil is lifted. If mentorship can with a student at the right time in the right place, I think that it always has value, and I think most of us in the world have experienced that. The key is it's not that you have to do this or you have to do this. I think a student has to be ready to be in a mentorship environment, and a mentor has to be the right person for that student. And when those two click, a lot of pretty amazing things can happen.
Have students have they broken anything you teach, like broken the rules, and to be like, wow, okay, good that you didn't listen to me or something? Or...
It's not a question sometimes of like, didn't listen to me, but rather again, like a teacher-student relationship is it's not unidirectional. Like that's not what it's to be. Look, if you're in a classroom with 1,000 people, it kind of has to be like lecture at the front, take notes, study.
Right.
Music's not like that. Classes, typically we got 15 people. Private lessons, it's one-on-one. And when you're in an individual scenario like that with smart people, these are adults, you know, at university level, it's happening all the time.
Yeah.
The questions where you're like, good question.
Yeah.
Or, you know, you challenge and then they find another way to solve the problem. And honestly, it's in those moments where you're just like, great. Like that's that's a celebrate. And sometimes it's a yes. You're like, yes, and what about this? You figured out this other way to do it, but you also kind of pigeonhole yourself. Is there a way we can make what you have and the technology both work? So again, that's where like the mentorship is more a dialogue when it's at its best. It's not always there. Both parties got to be in the right headspace, the right time and place. But yeah, I like the question. I loved when it happens. I want to see it more.
Yeah. Okay. I really want to. Oh yeah. So since you're what in your opinion, what's the hardest topic to teach in music production?
Compression.
Really?
Man, it's so subtle, right? It's what I find is there's the concept and then there's the application. And when it comes to compression, it goes everywhere from being the most subtle thing, especially at a mastering level, right? Like compressioning or limiting it, not limiting always, but compression at a mastering level, it can be so subtle. It's just affecting, for instance, it's just creating a tiny bit of glue, and already glue is like a very abstract concept. It's like a feeling that we have. All the way to like really aggressive compression and say this is now a sound shaping tool. It really is so multifaceted. That might also just be, you know, every time you learn something new, and I swear every time I go in to teach compression, I'm like explaining it or thinking it, and I'm finding a new kind of avenue to it. Where with equalization, spatial processing, I really feel like I have a really solid handle of explaining it and demonstrating it. Time-based effects, you know, delays, reverbs, I have a pretty deep relationship with it. And look, me and compression get along just fine, but explaining it to someone and showing them, you know, what a slow release, 1 decibel of gain reduction,
I still can't get
so subtle.
Yeah.
And how is that different than automation? Is it different than automation? Can we create the same effect with automation? If not, why? and A being those two things, like that level of subtle, like 2-to-1 ratio subtle. Okay, once we get into a snare drum, we got 10 decibels of compression, 8-to-1, a medium fast attack, medium fast release. Now we start to hear it. You can say, let me turn this on. You get into punishing a sound with some serious limiting. Now it's making sense. But the majority of compression in good mixing is very subtle.
Yeah.
The idea of being the difference between riding the fader and taking that vocal and just kind of, getting it of compression and letting it just do this. You can kind of get to this with both, but the compressor does things that we can't do with the fader. And the fader does things that the compressor can't do. And so I find even as I'm explaining it to you now, I'm okay at explaining it, but sometimes when you go to demonstrate it, you're like, man, this is so subtle. And they're like, what do I even listen to?
Right.
It's almost like, you're describing a new that they haven't yet heard. And you're like, yeah, but it's there. It's
I see it, yeah.
Until they've something like, oh my gosh, that's a new color.
Yeah.
You're like, so yeah, I found compression to be the trickiest one.
Yeah, so because you said as you teach compression, you sometimes find something that you learn, right? So has there been one thing recently that you learned about compression that hasn't been taught before, or maybe some people don't look at it that way?
I don't know if it hasn't been taught before, but I think for me, I've been getting deeper in my own practice into really understanding what is feeding a sidechain, how the sidechain is being generated, and when it changes, how much it changes the compression that is triggered. I learned that a lot through the immersive side, where we don't have these, immersive compressors that 128 objects. Instead, I've had to create my own sidechain material and then use that to trigger a whole bunch of compressors so that I can have, correlated compression. And that I started to realize, wait a second, when I pull up an LA2A, I don't think about what's feeding the compressor.
Yeah.
It's because at the end of the day, it's not just amplitude. In there is, I think, the sauce. So the compressor is A, the way that is happening in terms of gain reduction, and B is what is actually telling that cell for an optical compressor to actually turn down. What is it? Some of it, is there a high pass filter? Is there a low pass filter? And when I start to explain that, I'm like, oh, again, I explain it, I see a couple eyes kind of open up, and then I see a couple where I'm like, oh, I've gone too far. You kind of, again, it's order of business. That's a topic that is now it's crazy. Even as a Grammy-winning engineer, it's every day you get in there, you're like, oh, wow, how did I not think of that before? Or a colleague shows you something, you're like, that's a great way to do that. So yeah, I think sidechain content is something that I've tried to explain, and then even I'm like, I got to go back to the drawing board and explain it to myself.
Yeah. Okay. What genre of immersive audio, and which one actually doesn't?
Whew, what a question. I think it is more about in the sense that, for instance, we can, let's say, a hip hop track with very few elements. 808s, hi-hats, ad-libs. In immersive, I'm saying, okay, well, what's my job? My job is to find the spatial arrangement. Well, if I separate the background vocals, let's say completely from, or let's say the ad-libs completely from the main, and they feel like they're no longer a conversation, that's ruining the song. It's ruining the energy of the production. So I always remind myself, I don't owe the speakers anything. I just owe the song. That's it. Yeah. But if that hip-hop track had a bunch of Rhodes layers, Fender Rhodes, some guitar layers, some synths, some additional 808s. Maybe the hats are actually built up of multiple things. There's ad-libs, there's harmonies, there's a choir in the chorus, and there's a big string ensemble in the bridge. I've got material to work with where I can maintain the energy of the song. A lot of times, coming from in front of us, the 808s hitting our chest makes sense. The vocal in front of us, it's like even in conversation. Move over here, you're going to move. It's like, it's not that it's wrong, but a lot of times there's things that we just want to experience from in front of us for good reason. So I would say it's almost like if the arrangement calls for it, the spatial aspect is there. And I could apply that to any genre. Yeah. I work on a lot of hip hop, so I'm describing that where it's like a lot of minimalist music, but let's say folk music. Let's say there's a vocal and a guitar. Yeah. Okay, I can add a feeling where I guarantee if you toggle the two, you'd still say, ooh, that's a nice feeling. Is it transforming the experience? No, not necessarily. So to a certain degree, I think it really does come down to the way in which the music is produced. Genre-wise, I think they all work. Some challenges that I've In rock music, like think about heavy metal, guitars, loud drums, compression is a part of the sound, right? Power. One of the things I have learned, a bunch of rock music, bands like, Mother, into more like alt, but there's a band in Toronto called Crownlands, like, lots of guitar, lots of wicked mid-range, is that masking is actually part of the vibe. When you take 4 guitar layers, you put them on top of each other, they make this one thing.
Yeah.
And suddenly you separate, and you're like, oh, not only did the 3 that were left behind get weaker, but this one sounds super thin.
Yeah.
And that has been a fascinating one. So I think one of the challenges we have with rock is we want to create that sense of envelopment, and it can work, but the timbre of things when they're masked is during the mixing phase. So again, the answer in all of those questions is like anything can be mixed and I think have a really musical addition. The question is how much. And for me, I'm always just serving the song. I'm always like, if something sounds good to me, the arrangement is served that way, the lyric, like the narrative makes sense. But if it's like, well, it's cool, but the song sounds weaker, back to the front.
Yeah.
So I think I've worked in rock and folk and hip hop and orchestral music and jazz, in ambient music and music. It's all worked. I've also worked in all of those instances where there were arrangements where I was like, oh man, I kind of love the way, and the more I pull apart, the more I appreciate the decisions. And so there just needs to be a bit more of a subtle version made in an immersive context.
Interesting. So as somebody who just listens to music and had earphones, right, AirPods, do you immersive audio back into stereo for like a play, like listen to it in earphones or something like that? Or do you just suggest, just go with the stereo version because it'll sound better in the stereo?
I think if someone is listening to stereo loudspeakers, not headphones, only 2 speakers, and there's a stereo version of the record, listen to the stereo version.
Yeah.
Because a stereo fold of a 14, 16 plus channel mix. 16 is kind of the max, 9.1. Typically here we're in 12, which is 7.1.4. Asking the technology to fold 12 channels that have been all very carefully placed into 2 channels with no mastering, with no remixing. It's asking a lot.
Yeah.
When there's a producer who made a beautiful stereo version for 2 speakers. So to me, and actually it's very, very rare to be able to hear Atmos out of 2 speakers for this very reason.
Yeah.
Because fortunately, like for involved, this version will default when the stereo system's available. Now, when you get to 5.1, I'd much rather you listen to the 7.1.4 folded down to 5.1. If you have a sound bar, which is, even though it feels like it's just in front of you, it's putting sound into the room. I say give it a shot. The technology is there to try to expand it. When it to headphones, now we have a fascinating discussion. We're using binaural technology to then mimic a spatial environment. If we're sitting here listening in this room, we're surrounded by it, it all makes sense. Now we're going to use binaural technology to create a virtual version of this. I think I never let anything go that I'm not exceptionally proud of in headphones as well. That's my responsibility to the artist. It's my responsibility to the listener. I do not believe in just making it for the speakers and saying, whatever. Like, if you're going to listen on binaural, I feel confident about with any of my mixes or masters. I think that it should be very enjoyable. As to whether somebody connects more to the stereo production or the immersive production in headphones, I think it's very personal. Again, I think it's kind of arrangement-based.
Yeah.
Some stuff really comes out really nice, having that sense of space, and some stuff is meant to just be dry and hit hard and be punchy as all hell, and that's going to be probably favored to a version. In that moment, I don't think that's my job necessarily to recommend to a listener that something's better or worse. My job is to do the best I can possibly do with the version that I'm asked to make. And I think it's okay to let the listeners choose. I'm always getting artists sign off on it. I want the artist to love it. I don't see it as a contest.
Yeah.
I don't see there being a healthy relationship with the art if we see it as like, oh, my Atmos version should be better than stereo.
No.
Vice versa. I just want the Atmos version to be the best it can be for this, be the best it can be for the song. And the fact that listeners have access to both, like, it's a lucky bunch of listeners.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. And that most producers would never guess you use for immersive mixes.
I mean, it's a tough one. Let's see here. Going through the plugin list. Sure, I would say probably Pro Subharmonic. It's an Avid subharmonic generator. I adore it for creating discrete low frequency effects channel LFE information. If I get a mix, I want that to be, you know, a little bit, I can now and create, you know, a trigger and then create some extra low content at like 20 hertz because that LFE can handle it. So yeah, that would be the plugin that comes to mind right now that maybe other folks have come across, or maybe they've come across it. It's an Avid, it's like you have to be an ultimate user, I believe, or at least one of the, you know, upper stages of, and it's a stock.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Okay. Are you unique to immersive audio that would? No. Let me ask the question 1 second. That one I didn't think through fully. Okay. When you think of audio, what's the first feeling or experience that you want them to have when they take a listen to it?
I think I want somebody to feel totally inside the music. Now that can be literal, like my record, where there's literally people around you, or it can just be a sensation that the speakers kind of disappear and that the music is just, and that you are actively a part of it.
It's like one of those chambers, right? Like I forget, those hyper or something, I forget.
Yeah, and I do that amount of detail, that level of actually just physically, when sound is behind us, it's beside us, it's above us, it triggers our psychoacoustic listening differently.
For sure.
And so that feeling of immersion, I think at its core, you know, immersive audio immersion, like I want someone to feel like they're in it.
Yeah, because I was last year. There was like an immersive sort of type of thing, and they played it, and it's like I've listened to a track before in stereo, but immersive, it gave me chills.
Yeah.
It gives you like the weird bodily sensation. You know, maybe it was the first track, but it was quite incredible.
A large part of it is, especially when we're listening, I don't know if you were with like Genelec or PMC, Neumann. PMC room. You know, Maurice. Were you at NAM this year?
I was at NAM this year as well.
But the year before. So I presented in that room with Maurice in that room. I love it. What it can do is it can actually trigger a listening experience that is technically even closer to how we hear in nature.
Yeah.
We don't hear sound just in front of us. Right. Now, even if we listen to stereo on speakers, we still hear it in the room. We can't separate the environment. But immersive can physically put something in a place. And so what it does is I think you go into it with an expectation of your previous listening experiences, and suddenly that expectation is broken. And it can, when balance is right, when the arrangement is right, I do think it can get those sensations in us in a really visceral way. And I've had that experience many times.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. Okay, do you traditional mixing techniques like compression, EQ, and immersive, and or does sort of change how you use them?
Oh, I absolutely do. I mean, at the end of the day, you know, a sound source, I think it depends on the sound source. If I'm working on a kick drum, I mean, we still got that kick drum. Right? We still need to get the envelope to be, we still need to get the frequency contact correct. So equalization, compression, saturation, any of those tools are all the same, just now we've added space. I will say that maybe the hierarchy of things changes in immersive. Where in stereo, especially as a mastering engineer, I'm obsessed with compression and limiting, right? It's a big part of my job. But in immersive, I actually desire a significantly less amount of compression. And it's because when you have sound all around you, like what compression allows us to do, obviously limit dynamic range so we can ultimately make it a little bit more present. When everything is immersive, it actually starts to take away that feeling of envelopment, because the ways that we experience localization is oftentimes through transient information, and high frequency content is like what will trigger our knowledge that something is somewhere. So if I start to chop off all the peaks in a way that really make a stereo production be able to really hit properly, suddenly when I put it in space, I actually kind of want more of that energy back, because there's space for it to be experienced. So I find in immersive, suddenly panning is number one. Actually, sorry, number one is always volume. I don't care if you're in stereo, mono, immersive, doesn't matter. Volume is everything. Right? At the end of the day, volume affects our experience of spectral content, EQ. Compression is essentially just manipulating volume. Reverb can affect our perception of volume, of closeness and distance, also while adding more. So volume is number one. Panning is a big deal. You know, the whole composition is on where you place it. And Once you place something in space, let's say you place it behind you, you will hear it darker and quieter. So all of a sudden, the same EQ move you might have made in front might be the exact opposite in the back. And that's very fascinating. So I think that the timbral balance in terms of equalization is now number 3. And like beyond that, reverbs, compression is kind of more like lower on the list. In stereo, I feel like it comes in a little bit earlier. For all sorts of, anytime we describe that, of course there are exceptions to any rule. But in this particular case, I desire significantly less compression in immersive than I do in stereo.
Interesting. All right, let me reset. And this, I think, will be the last. All right. Okay. I don't know. You don't have to answer this question, but maybe. What's the biggest myth about immersive audio that you wish everyone would stop repeating?
Okay, I'll take a second. This is the biggest one. 2. Okay, I'll give 2.
Let's go.
So when object-based technology was presented to us, most know it through Dolby Atmos, but it's not the only one. This idea that it would suddenly replace the stereo mix and that we would do one mix to rule them all in all scenarios with no further change. Come on. I have created, at this point, a Grammy-winning level mix of my record. And when it came to stereo, I ripped the thing apart and I made a brand new stereo mix. It's because at a certain point, asking the technology to do this algorithmic down mix, which is exceptional, and it is very, very powerful. At a certain point, we want to present something in stereo, which is stereo is the pantheon of music, right? Like the majority of them we know has been produced this way. There are just different things that I need to do. I need to pan things differently. I need to equalize things differently. I need to, because of masking, because of expectations, even just because of like the history of how developed aesthetics around it. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think maybe at the beginning, there was a feeling as though maybe it had to be kind of presented to like a film and say, this is going to be a practical tool. For me, it's art. I don't care about the practicality. I want to create art that is meaningful. And so that's part 1. And I think part 2 is, it's very important for listeners and producers to understand how the headphones play a role in immersive audio. To me, we're not at a stage yet where if we sit and we listen in this room, just like you had chills in the PMC booth and it would happen here, it can be everything. When we go to headphones, rather than thinking of it needing to be the exact same, I think of it as a practical translation tool. And as long as it's a musical, powerful experience that brings the song to life, I see it as a great success at this stage. Does the future hold for us more potential in terms of actually making us feel like we're in this room? Yes. Are we there yet? No.
All right. 10 years from now, how do you think people will experience music differently than they do today?
I think that we're going to see a continual expansion of access to high-quality listening experiences. As technology expands, at first it gets expensive, it gets kind of exclusive, and then eventually we see that the just access to high-quality technology is there. So I hope that we see advancements in headphones so that the timbral qualities and the dynamic range can be totally experienced. Already we're seeing that, like with consumer, we see wireless speaker systems in stereo and immersive that are able to really give high fidelity listening experiences. Already we have soundbars that are studying their environments and trying to make decisions to basically tune the room for the listener. I think that can continue to get better so that we can, again, I don't care if it's in stereo or Atmos or 5.1, in any of those contexts, giving listeners accurate listening experiences. Immersively, we need this more than anything, because as much as the headphone experience is there, for a lot of folks who they don't have access to a multi-channel system, we're all saying this is, as soon as we can take your iPhone, you can plug it into multiple wireless speakers with a click of a button. Those speakers know where you are, they know what the music that's being played, and they can decode to the available system that has already self-tuned itself to an environment. Now we're talking.
Yeah.
You press play, boom, the experience, that experience that we have in a multi-channel system. This is what we need. It needs to be easy. It's not the consumer's job to have 50,000 cables, and it's one of the reasons that kept 5.1 from penetrating the market. This stage, Atmos and Immersive is doing a great job of making it more accessible, but there's work to be done. So I think over time, I hope that the energy goes into giving listeners more affordable, high-quality listening experiences.
Okay. All right. Okay, how do you approach low-end management in immersive formats? Do you treat LFE as creative or purely supportive?
So there's two questions in there.
Yeah.
The first is, how do I deal with low-end management?
Right.
In my speaker system, for all full-range speakers, I do not have to use bass management. It's awesome.
Yeah.
It leads to a sense of translation because I'm taking more variables out of the equation. When I built the studio, I treated it like a mastering engineer. I mean, I want to, what I'm doing translates to the world. So one of the challenges with bass management is it is doing a lot of work, and suddenly the low-end free stuff that I want to hear behind me is coming from in front of me. It's getting amalgamated with a whole bunch of other information, and so it can lead to translation issues. So I don't deal with low-end management on a speaker level. Now, the height speakers are a little smaller for me. I have explored low-end bass management for those speakers, but honestly, the ones I have, the Lipinskis, they go down to about 35, and I'm really never putting 20 hertz content on the ceiling. It's not to say you can't. If you can, then at that point we got to hear it, at least know what's going on, but I haven't had to cross that bridge. So then the next, the LFE. I treat it, you said supportive. I think that those can actually be the same thing. So maybe more so what I'll describe is this. I never use it as a crossover to send information that is going to be in, let's say, my left and right. Let's imagine a kick drum. I'm not going to send 40 hertz and below of the kick drum to the LFE. To make new decorrelated material for that. And that's for many reasons. One is I treat it more like a low frequency effect in that way. I want it to augment, but also let's say a listener doesn't have it, or the listener's got it really low or really high, or a fold down happens right into a sound bar, something along those lines. I want my main level speaker experience to be complete, just like in stereo. You know, we don't take our experience full, and then if someone has an extension speaker, it's going to happen. So I treat the LFE as additional supportive content or additional creative content, but I don't use it as an extension speaker or a crossover to solve low frequency distribution.
Okay, interesting. I'll ask you one more question after this question, but this is usually like my favorite to ask, and I don't want to miss it. If there's a billboard for music producers to see, what message are you putting on there?
Collaborate.
That's great. Yeah. All right, cool. Is there anything you have going on right now that you like to obviously your Immersive album that just won a Grammy. Congratulations again.
Thank you.
Anything else that you're doing, anything else that's coming up on your radar that you'd like people to check out?
I mean, in terms of YouTube, I go through periods with the record. I was very active. So if someone's just coming to me now, there's a whole of videos there on how that record was made, from microphone techniques to compositional discussions, interviews with other partners in the record. So yeah, I mean, I think kind of stay up to enjoy making content when I feel like I have something, valuable to share on Instagram, or if it's on YouTube. YouTube, of course, for kind of longer format stuff. Instagram just to usually as like, I want to create a story like you do, but also it's like it will lead longer format opportunity for learning. So I'd say if folks are interested in that, and then through opportunities that come up with either the record or new projects and collaborations are always going to be on Instagram for me.
All right. To finish this off, this is going to be like a minute video. What's one thing that you would teach somebody about immersive audio? You get to choose only one little thing that you want to share about it.
I think that I would want to share about the idea of placing microphones at the source during recording to be able to capture the close sound and the relationship with space. And so a very simple could be, let's imagine acoustic guitar. We want to put it in our front speaker, but I also want to get a sense of that acoustic guitar being in a space. The simplest concept is, rather than wait later and do it with reverb, is place microphones in ways that are intended to be in our other speakers to give me a sense of where that instrument is in that environment. And there's nothing in post-production that can replace it, because the tiny micro timing information that happens as that guitar sound moves through those microphones, and all of the infinite possibilities of reflections in a space, they can't even come close to being reproduced. And yeah, of course, it's a beautiful studio, amazing. But even in a traditional studio, we can still get just enough timing information at the source that can make a huge difference in the production.
So you mentioned mics. Is there any quick tip for using, like having a mic technique helpful in immersive audio?
Yep, understand the speaker layout and place your microphones accordingly. So there are things called arrays, which are collections of microphones, and a grand array for immersive would be a 7+4 array, basically one mic per speaker. But even if you can't do that, I say this to my students all the time, just do 4, front and back, quad. Just even a pair in the back, which we do for drums all the time. We play a nice room pair. But remember, in stereo, if you take a room pair, you put it on a drum set, what does that do? It pushes the drum set back. In immersive, we can do the exact opposite. I can literally put the listener in the room, put you here, and and we're pointing this way. That's the front speakers, that's the back speakers. I can actually have you experience the back wall for real. So understand the speakers and place your microphones accordingly.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Man, my pleasure.
Pleasure speaking with you. Thank you for sharing all the knowledge.
Thank you.
Check out Justin Gray.